Hello, welcome to another Retro RHLSTP, this time back to early 2022 with my doppelganger and fellow monoball, Charley Boorman. We look like each other from every angle, though he's a little taller than I am, but I am mistaken for him a lot. And it's free, full video on YouTube if you like to watch rather than just listen. And look, the exciting news is that the Prossers have gone the way of the Dripsters. Only the badges remain. If you're a supporter of this podcast, the people who used to support Drip, that they couldn't all survive. The people who did Acast Plus, they can't survive. It was rubbish. And so now we're just concentrating all our efforts on badges. GoFasterStrike.com/badges. If you want to get all the videos and be able to watch them all, even the most current one, if you want to get ad-free podcasts a day before everyone else, if you want to get advanced news of who the future guests will be, if you want to get a membership pack with a special membership card and badges, if you want to be entered to a monthly draw, there's so many wonderful things you can get if you become, there's backstage interviews, sometimes extra podcasts. For £5 a month, GoFasterStrike.com/badges, you're a regular member, you get all of that stuff. If you pay £8 a month, you get a gold badge instead of a red badge, and you get an extra podcast with me and Ali asking me emergency questions every month. Plus, we're going to do a monthly Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me any question, or we'll do a video of me answering them as best I can. If you want to pay £10 or more a month, you get a platinum badge. Nothing else other than that, but you just get this moral superiority. And if I see you wearing one of those platinum badges, whatever the situation, I have to talk to you for at least 30 seconds. So that's what you get for that. But thanks so much for your support. Advertising revenue is going down a little bit, and so we could really do with a few more people supporting us in this way. If you like all the free stuff, and if you have the money to spare, £5 a month, that would be a terrific way to help finance these podcasts. I'd love it if that was the only way we did it. I would love to just have the fans supporting it. It doesn't quite work, but it definitely is a massive help to us. So please support us if you can, and come and see us if you can. There's a RHLSTP in Chesham on the 24th of May at 1 p.m, and my guest is Esther Manito, so please come and see that if you can. It's in Zone 9. You can get there on the tube, Londoners. It's unbelievable. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. richterring.com/RHLSTP for Chesham, and details of Sheffield, London and Edinburgh gigs as well. Okay, see you in a sec.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leicester Square Theatre. Please welcome a man who nearly killed a woman in the audience yesterday. It's Richard Herring. Thank you very much. Lovely to see you. Thank you for coming, everyone. You're small but perfectly formed. Very nice to see you. Welcome to Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. I was talking to Angela Rippon from off of Master Team yesterday. Who remembers Master Team? That's my mate. I used to... she was great on that. No one remembers Master Team. I used to eat it was on between 1985 and 1987. I used to eat my tea watching it with my mum, and it was through a period where my mum was making a lot of soups and stews, and that's what I think of. I can't remember anything about the quiz, but Angela Rippon. Anyway, I saw her yesterday. She's doing well. She calls it RHLSTP anyway. So it's like I was in Harpenden yesterday doing an afternoon gigs about Morecambe and Wise. This Eric Morecambe Centre's been set up in Harpenden, and Robin Ince asked me to come along and talk about Morecambe and Wise as a double act, and we saw this afternoon gig. We'd been moved to the function room because we hadn't sold enough tickets in the theatre. Shame there isn't a function room in this place, isn't it? And that last time I'd been involved, I went to the theatre where Eric Morecambe died. I had a gig in Tewkesbury, I think it is. Is that right? And not enough people came to that, and we were moved into the bar. So I think Eric Morecambe's got something against me in the heavenly realm. That's where I met Angela Rippon, who was doing a different thing. But in our function room, about 50 minutes into this hour-long chat, a woman in the front row said, "I think there's something wrong with this lady." And there was a woman in the front row. It was quite an elderly audience. I'd already spotted a bloke in the third row who was sleeping. So people just come in out of the cold. But she'd gone right back, and her head was right back, and her eyes had gone. And I thought she'd gone. I thought we'd lost her. We stopped the gig, but she, out of respect for her past soul, but she came back alive again and was okay. She was okay. I don't think she died through laughter, is what I would say. She died through boredom, if that had happened. So it's a bit of a shame. And also, I've had a very full weekend. On Saturday, I went to, it was my mother-in-law's birthday, and my wife, for some reason, decided a good present for my mother-in-law would be a speedboat ride on the Thames. And should I take us, my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old son, and her dad, who when last time was on a cruise, had to get off because he couldn't cope with a cruise ship moving over the sea. And so we did. Speedboats aren't really my thing. I'm not really into the adrenaline stuff like my guest today. And but it was all slow to begin with. It was nice, but once we got past Tower Bridge, it went at full pelt, and it was really fast. And it was jumping up and down and hitting the waves, and it was going to the side and to the side. Luckily, my son was going, I don't like it, so he had to stop and go slowly. But I really was it's been the most delighted I've had to have a child, I have to say. It's finally they have a use, because I was fucking bricking it, I have to tell you. Look, before we go on, I should thank the Kickstarter people who have backed this in order to get a mention. John Walker backed us. He says, 25 years an MS warrior and still shuffling. I'm assuming that's multiple sclerosis, but it might be Marks and Spencer's. I don't know. It's either way, but well done, John. Jim Parkin also is another big supporter of the podcast. He doesn't want anything said. David Smith, I haven't read this. Let's see what he says. I'd like Richard to dedicate the episode to my cockapoo, Beans. Beans is a wonderful dog and a regular listener of RHLSTP. Thank you. And I'd like him and all your listeners to know I think he's a good boy, the best boy. That is, he says, feel free to be offensive. I'm not going to be offensive to Beans, a little cockapoo. Fucking hell. What has my life become? It's amazing. Right, look, my guest this week is going to be a fantastic show, I can tell you. He's probably best known for his appearance on the Podge and Rod show. Yeah. Though he was also, of course, Dungeon Master on Tucker's Luck. And I think we should talk to him about that for an hour. Will you please welcome The Universe May Be Destroyed. This is the first time we've ever met and been in the same room. Some people think we look like each other. It's crazy. Will you please welcome the amazing Charley Boorman, ladies and gentlemen. Here he is. Fine. It's Charley Boorman. It's a mirror. It's a mirror. Who put a mirror? Who put a mirror down the centre?
You're just my chubby brother.
I thought you were tall. Someone told me you were really tall, so I thought when you came out it would be funny because you'd be tall. But you're the same height as me as well, more or less.
Well, a little taller,
Little
but, you know,
taller.
not that it really matters. And we were checking each other's penises in the changing room as well.
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
I've
yours
got to
is
say.
very small, Charlie, yes. Well, our genitals are quite similar. There's a lot of similarities. We'll get into that later.
Well, we've only got two between us, haven't we? So,
Yes.
so two balls we should be known as.
Two balls, but you've lost a ball and I've lost a ball for the
Yeah.
same cause. We've been talking about it this afternoon for another podcast. You lost your right one as well. I lost my right one as well. No good. If we could have had a full set.
I know. It could have been handy, actually. But I have a false testicle,
Yes.
and you don't. So I've got a little rubber one, and it's and when I was in Jordan a few years ago, and I was floating around in the Dead Sea, and it floats so much that when I was swimming, it kept flipping me over, and this little hairy testicle just kept popping out of the water. So I've got a life jacket attached to me, so I'm good. So if we were at the Titanic, you'd be fucked and I'd be fine.
I'd just hold on to you. It'll be fine. There are a few weird coincidences. Like I've been mistaken for you a few times by people who insist that I am you, even when I say I don't know what they're talking about. So a guy literally came up to me in a club and said, well done on the long way round. And I went, I don't know what that is. And he said, when you motorbike around the world with Ewan McGregor. And you go, no, I don't. that isn't ringing any bell. Like, oh, yeah, that time, yeah. How had I forgotten that? And also, I'm interested in, you got the gig advertising herring shoes.
Oh, yeah. Well,
How did you get that?
Do you like those shoes?
I do. I actually buy stuff from Herring Shoes, partly because they've got herring written all over them. Also, my name is Herring, and I look like you. Why did they get you to do it? Did you get that?
You're the sort of ugly
me?
brother, I suppose. that they need someone to sell it. I don't know why I got those shoes. He saw me wearing them in some thing, and they got in contact with me and said, "Would you like some shoes?" And
Yeah.
of course, you don't want to buy shit, do you? Really?
It should be me.
It should be. I know. Well, listen, I'll put a word in. Actually, I tried already, and he said, "Who?"
I used to. I think I presume it's the same firm. Well, we used to, when our school coach would go to Stratford-on-Avon, we'd pass a shop called Richard Herring Shoes, and everyone in the coach was saying Richard Herring, Richard Herring, Richard Herring Shoes. So I'm presuming it's the same guys, but there is a Richard Herring involved in that company, I believe. Also, we both love motorcycling around. That's me. That's me. That's I love. It's me turning the handles to make it go, Charlie. That's Kawasaki 792. That's my baby. So that's what I've got. So we've got there's a lot of... Have you ever been mistaken for me? Has anyone mistaken you for me?
No.
No.
No, I'm sorry. I've got to be truthful. There's a guy called Henry Cole who looks a bit like you as well,
Okay.
actually. We could be triplets. And he rides motorbikes as well. And people come up to me and they say, "Oh," he said, "I loved your show when you rode through New Zealand." And I go, "That wasn't me." I go, "That was Henry." I said, "You've just insulted me."
I find it insulting that people compare me to you, Charlie. So it's okay.
I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to be me. I spend most of my time not wanting to be me.
Oh, that's not fair. That's not nice. Well, it's absolutely lovely to meet you. We have had a good chat about our ball. There are balls in plural between the two of us, so that's a good thing. But look, there's so much. I mean, I hadn't forgotten, but of course you have this amazing, as well as all the motorcycling stuff that you're probably best known for now. You've got all this amazing acting work you did, mainly as a younger man. They're still doing a bit of acting every now and again, or does it come up?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done so much. I mean, well, my father's a film director.
Yeah.
And he's a guy called John Boorman, and he directed films like Deliverance, and Excalibur, and Hope and Glory, and Wolf Forest, and lots and lots of movies. And I've got 3 sisters, and so there's 4 of us. And so whenever Dad was making a movie and there was a part for a kid in it, he would say, "Don't employ any children. I've got 4 free ones." so we were just thrown into movies. So the first movie I was in was, has anyone seen Deliverance here?
Yes.
With Burt Reynolds and stuff.
Yeah.
And so my father said to me, he said, "Charlie, look, if you sit on that sofa with that bloke, I'll give you a tricycle." It sounded really dodgy, but I wanted the tricycle. So at the end of the movie, when John Voight comes back to his wife at the end of the movie, there's a little boy sitting on a sofa, and so that was me. And so that's where it kind of went from. And then we were always thrown into his movies, and I played one of the characters in Excalibur.
Yeah.
Mordred, and I had a nice suit of gold armor and rode a horse. It was brilliant. And it kind of went from there, really. And I'm really heavily dyslexic, so school was always a nightmare for me. And in school, I was always in the school plays, and that was really the only place I felt like I could express myself. And so I think my father saw that there was no point going to university, so I left school at 16, and I went off and I was making movies and had some success in the sort of 80s and 90s.
Yeah, well, The Emerald Forest is a great film as well, which you're the star of The Emerald Forest.
Yeah, I had to sleep with my father for 17 years to get that part.
Well, it's a weird, because it's a film in which your characters sort of ended up living with tribes in South America. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you become like part of the tribe, but there's a lot of nudity in it and some sauciness.
17, there was a lot lot of naked girls as well. It was like, wow,
But your
going
dad
straight from boarding school to there, it was brilliant.
But your dad's directing it. Was that a bit weird? Having your dad.
It's funny, isn't it? You know, a lot of. I think at the beginning of the movie when I got the part, there was lots of this sort of talk of nepotism and the people who know he's only got the part because he's. Because of his dad and stuff, and so I think Dad was always much harder on me whenever I was in any of his movies. He was to sort of make. I had to be better than than I needed to be in order to sort of, you know, stop that. But then I remember sort of, I think a week into the show, I got absolutely blind drunk, and the crew had to carry me home, and so it kind of the ice broke on that bit. But it's always tougher when the door sort of opens for you. You know you can go in, but you know, if you do get the job, then you usually tend to have to work a little bit harder.
Yeah,
But,
and the movie, and if you're carrying, I mean, it's different sitting on a couch in Deliverance that you weren't going to wreck that film. But
I didn't get picked. Imagine if I'd taken points on that movie, I would have been a millionaire.
But it also, I think I saw that film before I knew there was any relationship between the two. And you're excellent in it.
Oh, it's very kind. But no, I mean, it was funny growing up in Ireland because we grew up in the middle of the countryside in Ireland and in the middle of the nowhere, and then sort of every 2 or 3 years we'd go off to California, or go to go to Georgia, or go to the South Pacific or Brazil, or wherever it was that Dad was making a movie.
Yeah.
And whether or not we were in it or not, we were just these kids who kind of went along. So there was always people kind of hanging around the house, and, you know, I'd go out and knock about on motorbikes and then come back for lunch, and there'd be a table full of people. I had no idea who they were. They were just eating all my food and take. But so it was great fun. So we either lived in the middle of nowhere or we were on a film set. So it was kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
But and then, you know, all of Dad's friends, like, you know, the reason Dad got into America was because he made a film called Catch Us If You Can with the Dave Clark Five. I don't know if you ever remember them. They were sort of a flash in the pan band. And they did that song, Catch Us If You Can.
Yeah.
And it was a famous film song. Anyway, by the time he made the movie, Dave Clark Five were finished. And so that didn't really help his film. But Lee Marvin saw that movie.
Okay.
And he was the biggest box office at the time.
Yeah.
And he came up to my dad and said, I want you to direct my next movie. And that was a film called Point Blank, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic film. Yeah. And so Dad went off to the States, and they became friends. They made couple of movies together, and he became my godfather.
Yeah.
of all people. He was a shit godfather though. I mean, he was drunk most of the time, and I don't think he ever once bought me a present.
Never sent you a book token.
No, never sent me a book
Lee
token.
Marvin.
But he was an amazing guy. I mean, he fought in the South Pacific in the Second World War. He was a U.S. Marine, and he saw proper action. I think he drank because when they were in the South Pacific, they were led into an ambush, and his whole battalion were wiped out except for him and his mate. And not a lot of people know this, but he was shot in the ass. And you know, being a Marine, that suggests you were running away. You know? And but it was a ricochet, and he was on the ground, and his friend came back, got him, carried him out.
Wow.
And so he was always a bit loose.
Yes.
And I do remember one funny story about him. Well, there's quite a few, really. But anyway, this one in particular. So Point Blank had just come out and was a big success. And he... so they were at Malibu Pier on the beach. There was a famous restaurant there that everybody would eat at. And so my dad and my mum and my two older sisters and Pam, his wife, his first wife, anyway, were there, and Lee was hammered drunk, and it was his car, and Dad said, "Look, Lee, give me the keys to the car. You're too drunk to drive." And Lee wouldn't give him the car, so they had this tussle. And Lee's 6'3", and Dad's my height. And anyway, Dad got the keys, and he ran to the car, and got the driver's car, and he locked the door, and Mum and my sisters all dived into the car as well. And everyone rolled up their windows, and Lee was shaking the car, and he wouldn't get in. And then he finally climbed up onto the roof of the car, and he wouldn't get off the roof of the car. And Dad thought, God, he's going to be here all night. So he thought, well, it's only a mile down the PCH. Now, PCH is Pacific Coast Highway, is one of the busiest roads in Los Angeles, and it runs all the way along the coast up to San Francisco. So he got in the car, and Lee's still on the roof of the car, and he gets onto the road, and he turns down, and he's going down about 200 meters down the road, and there's a police bike coming up the other way, and the police bike sees this, and he puts the lights on, chases my father, pulls him over, and you can imagine Lee, his concentration is now on the policeman, and I mean the foul language that was coming out of his mouth, and the policeman completely ignored him. He walked up to the car and he knocked on the window of the car, and Dad rolled down the window thinking, fucking hell. And the guy leans in and he goes, "Sir, do you realize you have Lee Marvin on the roof of your car?" And my father says, "Well, yes, I do." And he goes, "Okay, that's fine, sir. Have a nice evening." And off he went. So he was a fun man to be around.
Yeah,
he really
amazing.
was.
Yeah, it must be so incredible to, without, when you're not even really aware of necessarily who those people, as a kid, would be surrounded by all those people. But I also read that you were the first male to hold Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
As a...
Well, yes, I was, but I mean, it doesn't sound as amazing as it sounds. That's you make it sound.
Yeah.
Great. It was. I was a page boy at their wedding,
Right.
and so she was dumped into my hands, crying.
Right. Someone must have held her before you were a
parents,
okay.
uncles, aunts.
I kind of imagined you were at the birth somehow. She popped out.
Catching.
You delivered her.
Hey, I'm first.
Oh, that's nice. So yeah, when she was a baby, you held Angelina Jolie. Does she remember? Have you met her since?
No, not a clue. No. And but I must say that Angelina's mother, Micheline, and what is was one of the most beautiful. I remember I was only 9, and I was completely and utterly besotted by her. I thought she was just the most beautiful person on earth.
Right. Oh, that's lovely. Very nice. What about Tucker's Luck? Do you remember being in Tucker's Luck? That's the big one. That's what
I did the Emerald Forest and travelled around the world promoting the movie, and then my next job was Tucker's Luck. I was dungeon master in Tucker's Luck.
What's Todd Carty like in real life? Is he
He's really?
Did you ever drive around with him?
Really nice guy,
Is he,
actually. Yeah, and I keep bumping into him, every so often, and he's always comes up and says hello, and he's a proper fella.
It's good. Do you remember being on the Podge and Rod show? Do you know what it is?
I don't remember the Podge and Rod show. No,
it should
I don't.
be more memorable. I think it's an Irish puppet show of some
Oh,
kind.
the Podge. Oh, yeah. No, that's quite loose as well. Well,
Yeah.
they do a nighttime version.
Oh, do they?
And I think it was an evening one. Yeah, and they were quite rude. It was brilliant, actually. That was good. And they ply you with Guinness and get you drunk, and then throw you out in front of the cameras. It was nice.
Good. And the thing I wanted to ask you from Wikipedia, which is not necessarily the greatest of sources, were you in Alien?
No,
It
no.
says you were
I've been
in
asked
Alien.
it a lot. No, I think, but lots of people say, "Oh, your dad directed Alien," and
Right.
I say, "No, he didn't." And they go, "Yes, he did." No, he didn't. That was Wrigley.
Okay, so you didn't, because it says that you and Ridley Scott's son were. I mean, I'm not telling you were in it.
No.
If you're saying you weren't.
No, it definitely wasn't in
Okay.
it. Yeah,
But that's what's on Wikipedia.
That's Wikipedia.
What can Wikipedia? So when the acting you ended up sort of being a painter and decorator in between acting jobs.
Yeah, my acting career went really downhill. I mean, I had some success with Emerald Forest in 84, 85.
Yeah.
And then I did a number of films on that, but I kept choosing films for their location. So, they told this film's shooting in Africa, and I'd take it, and then I'd read the script on the plane on the way there, and I'd think, fucking hell, this is shit. but it's a great location. And I was obsessed by travel and by people and the people that you meet in these different countries. And I think I probably got that from my father. My father had a reputation for being a guy who makes movies in really difficult locations and a tough filmmaker. And I think I got that sense of travel and being in those kind of difficult places, and I loved it. And Dad and watching Dad thrive in those situations was great. I mean, he was quite a tough. He had a terrible reputation of being quite tough. He used the C word all the time, and you'd be sitting there especially when you're young, about 13, on set, and suddenly you hear him screaming and shouting and firing people all over the place, and you're thinking, oh God, and just wanting to just sort of shrivel up and run away.
Has he settled down in old age?
He has. He's 89 now.
Yeah.
And he wrote 3 books in COVID and a script.
Right.
And so he wrote a lovely book called Conclusions, his sort of last chapter of his life. And he says, I don't think I'll have time for more. He said. So, but he's an amazing guy. I mean, his body kind of sort of has let him down a little bit, but his mind is just incredible.
That's great. And you met Ewan on a film, so it was up and down, right? The acting career, so it wasn't.
Oh no, it was tough. I mean, because I was going to all these different countries and the films weren't that great. They were becoming less and less.
Yeah.
And whenever I did a film, because of being dyslexic, I really struggled learning lines, and I just found it incredibly difficult, and it used to completely stress me out. And so I was sort of going off acting because of that.
Right.
And doing theatre and having to learn the whole play was just, I would have to start months ahead to learn the lines, and it was awful. But anyway, so I was sort of doing less and less, and I'm doing more and more painting and decorating, and I married and I had a couple of kids, and then the films became less and less, and I was then doing more and more kind of proper building work, and at that point, some point I thought, this is probably where I'm going to be now, and I felt it was quite frustrating, really, because I still felt I wanted to travel. I wanted to do more,
Yeah.
And then I did this film called The Serpent's Kiss with Ewan, and it had Pete Postlethwaite, Greta Scacchi, Richard E. Grant, Ewan McGregor, and myself. And I thought, this is brilliant. I'm back. This is my comeback film. Anyway, we had a brilliant time doing it. The film was absolute shit, and it went straight to DVD. And I'm not even sure if anybody bought the DVD. I mean, it was an awful film, but I met Ewan,
Yeah.
and we both had our first children at the same time. They were both about 6 or 7 months old when we did the movie together, and we just hit it off. I remember the first conversation I had with Ewan was all about motorcycles, and he had a Moto Guzzi California, and we spoke about that, and then here we are 25 years later, and we're still talking about motorbikes, and that's about it, really. I was talking to him last night, and he was just, oh, Charlie, I just got this new bike. What do you think? And I love the whole thing of Zoom and or just talking on WhatsApp on your phone. It connects people from all over the world, doesn't it? Anyway, so, and then we ran motorbike race teams together. We did track days together. We did all sorts of stuff together, and then eventually Ewan. And then we used to go sort of on long weekends together, and then we thought we'd do a longer trip and go down to south of France, meet our kids and wives there, ride down, ride back, for a bit of adventure. And then Ewan rang me up and he said, Charlie, you better come over to the house. I've got this idea. And we came over, and there was this big map on the table, and it was a map of the world. And he said, look, why don't we, instead of forget Spain, let's go to China. I went, oh, okay. And then we thought, well, if we get to China, what about Mongolia? And then we kind of thought, well, we may as well go to New York. And our wives were sort of just looking at us and thinking, well, they were going, how long is that going to take? And we kind of worked it out that it was going to be about 4.5 months. And they both didn't bat an eyelid about it at all. I said to Ollie afterwards, I said, Ollie, well, you're not worried that we're going off for 4.5 months? She goes, no, I think you'd be right.
Sounds like they want to get rid of you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, nowadays, since lockdown, now that we're kind of the world's opening up again, I keep seeing my suitcase at the front door. So he's sort of going, "Come on, go,"
And so, did you just were going to do it anyway, and then thought, let's turn it into a TV show, or was the TV show a part of in the mix at that point?
It was, we were going to do it, and then I didn't really have the money to do it. Ewan, I was, painter decorator, wife, 2 kids, a mortgage. I just didn't have the money. And Ewan had just finished Star Wars, so he was minted. But being Scottish, I probably wasn't going to get any of that. So, but then someone mentioned about a book and said that what they thought would make a really nice book. 2 great friends going off traveling around the world, and so we approached some book people and said, and that actually was quite easy to get a book. And because you go there, because the pitch was that we're going to go from here to here, not really sure what's going to happen, but I'm sure it'll be all right. And the book people thought, God, that's great, 2 friends, lots is going to happen and stuff like that. So we got that, we walked. I remember walking out of the publishers and having this book deal, and I'm thinking, well, that's great, but I can't fucking read, let alone write. I had no idea how we were going to do it. And Ewan's, just as bad as I am. So then we thought we would do these video diaries, and we would get someone to help us write the book, and we both knew exactly what we wanted from the book.
Yeah.
And so this guy would then help us, and then we thought, well, if we're going to do video diaries, we may as well film it, and then it kind of sort of snowballed from there. But getting the TV show was, we still didn't have a TV deal until I think 3 weeks before we were leaving, and we'd already started filming the preparation and all this kind of stuff, it was when we were doing the leaving party that my brother-in-law James, who was working for Sky at the time, and they'd already passed on it, or he passed on it. And then when we had the leaving party, we were showing a reel of stuff that we'd filmed. We were just showing stuff of it, and he suddenly got the idea of it, and he said, right, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, the contract will be at your door. So like 3 weeks before we leave, we got the TV deal. But when we were in Australia, we flew over to Australia. Ewan was making a second Star Wars there. And we went to make a little pilot because people just weren't getting the idea. Anyway, so while we're there, we thought we'd go to one of the TV stations and pitch the idea to them. Anyway, we went to this one place, Channel 8 or 10, or I can't remember. Anyway, we're sitting and we did this pitch, and we're going to go around the world on these motorbikes, and we're going to meet people along the way, and it's going to be really exciting. Anyway, we finished the pitch, and we said, what do you think? And he said, do you want to know what I really think? And we said, yeah, we'd really like to. And he goes, I think 2 wankers on motorcycles. And that was it. Anyway, the year later, we sold it to them for a fortune. So fuck them. But yeah, so yeah, that was, so it was a really odd. And then there was no reason why it would be successful. I mean, it just.
But how much was there? Was there really no planning? You say you knew where you were going to go, obviously, but the route
there was plan. There's always, if you do a big trip like that where you have multiple countries that you're going to go to, you've got to. In some of the countries, you have to do carnets, and you have to, like we're going to all have to do now, just to go to fucking France. We're going to have a carnet for our it's a nightmare. But so we had to have that, and I think if you're going to do a big trip. I certainly wouldn't plan it to the nth degree, but I would certainly look at the route where you're going to go, and then sort of within each of those countries, think of what you'd really like to do in those countries, and then you just connect the dots and off you go. So it's kind of, and that's kind of the way we did it. We wanted it to be as authentic as possible.
Yeah, and I suppose it's most people don't travel in that way. So most of us, if we are going to China, would fly to China.
Yeah, I mean, flying is fine because you leave an airport that looks like an airport, and then you land in an airport that looks like an airport. And if you land and take off and land in America, I don't know if you've done lots of traveling in America, but I think all the airports are made by the same person. Right. And I was at one stage I was flying all over the place at one stage, and I was standing in this airport, and I couldn't remember what city I was in. Because I was thinking, I've just left Chicago, but this looks like Chicago. It was just... So it's a very different experience when you fly in somewhere, and as opposed to being on time. It's like when you and I went down through Sudan, and then went from Sudan into Ethiopia. So we went down the Nile, and it's stunning, and it's very deserty and dry, and I mean it's just beautiful, and then you got to the Ethiopian border, and there's literally like on a map, there's a line, and just on the other side of the border, everything changed. It was wood, it was green, and then when you change, all the tarmac color changes, the color of the paint on the road changes, the way the dashes on the road are different, the signposts different, the architecture, the way people dress. Yeah. It's just the most extraordinary way of traveling. It's brilliant.
And I guess you just get an idea of it's even looking at a map, it's hard to get the idea of the scale of the world, or even how far And a globe, you don't really. It's not even really accurate in terms of distance. So
No, yeah, the maps are all distorted a
Yeah.
little bit. So Africa always looks a bit smaller than. I mean, Africa's a fucking big place.
Yeah.
And especially when you travel through it, you just think, oh my God, it's like going across Australia. You know, when you fly home from Sydney, you know, the first 5 hours you're flying over Australia. You know, but you look at it on a map and it's just a little island down at the bottom of the globe.
Yeah.
So it's the best way in the world to travel overland.
And it's what you said earlier. Is it that it's about the people you are meeting along the way, and people are. I mean, not everyone would have recognised even who Ewan was.
Well, they
right?
certainly wouldn't have recognised
They wouldn't
me.
recognise from the Emerald Forest.
But they would have recognised. I know. I used to keep dropping my trousers, and just fact that was the only time I ever got an award for my acting career. Was I was voted in Germany. I was voted best bum of the year.
Oh, that's not bad.
And being an actor with a big ego, I of course I went to collect it. And,
But even Star Wars isn't everywhere, right? Is that that some people wouldn't have?
yeah, I remember one time we were in Tangier and we went to one of those troglodyte places where they filmed the original Star Wars in those sunken things. So Ewan goes, I don't want to go there because I'm just going to get mobbed. And anyway, we went. Then he had a big beard, admittedly, but we went around and we were walking around, and not a single person. And eventually, I said, "Ewan, stand by that poster of you." And he was standing by the poster of him, and he had a beard in the film, and he was standing by the poster, and people were just walking by. And I like to think that because it was so hot, that people's brains were just fried, and just didn't make it. And we were pissing ourselves with laughter, and he was going, "These aren't the bikes you're looking for." And all this kind of stuff.
I mean, you wouldn't think
great
it would
fun.
be really him, I suppose. Maybe that.
But I think once you get to Eastern Europe and start getting to Kazakhstan and Mongolia and Siberia and Far East Russia and all those places, people are spending much more time just getting along and just living, and it's a very different. We're very lucky here in the West in this sort of opulent kind of lifestyles that we all have, and everything's on our fingertips. Whereas, you don't have to travel very far to see that it all gets a bit harder.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing way to get perspective on people. But I've heard you saying that 99% of people in the world are good people,
They are
and
good. But it's the, you asking me that question. Would you be happy with 6 and 7 year olds running your country?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yes, I would. But it is true, that I think if you look at Iran, I spent a bit of time making a TV show in Iran, and it's one of the nicest places you'll ever travel through, and people are lovely. And they're very funny. Everyone speaks English. Everyone's really well educated. The food is amazing. And then you've got these nutters who are looking after the place, and they don't reflect the people, And it's the same in most countries. It's these nutters who are, like Putin at the moment. He's just had a bit of power for a bit too long, hasn't he? Really, and but was it ultimate power ultimately corrupts? So.
Yeah, well, he definitely has. That seems to be the case in this. But you've sort of been everywhere, right? There's so many different series you've done anyway.
Yeah.
But even with the three with Ewan, you've sort of nearly been everywhere. So is it giving you a perspective on the world as a whole? Is there a place that you prefer, or is it just the fact that you're going to all these different places?
I think
the excitement to you?
I'm a big fan of the African continent. I think Kenya and Uganda, Rwanda and Tanzania, Malawi and all those places are just. I think it's the most magical place in the world. It's the only continent in the world. It's the only continent in the world where there's actually any wildlife left, and everything and every other continent you've been to, it's all just been killed off. And so I do motorcycle tours from Cape Town to Victoria Falls. Once a year, we take a bunch of people on motorbikes, and we go through South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and we go on all these safaris, and we stay in these beautiful lodges, and I mean, stunning places. And where else in the world can you be riding along a motorbike and you have to stop because 40 elephants are crossing the road, and you're going, this is the third time today, for fuck's sake, and you actually get to think, if I see another fucking elephant, and it's amazing. And the giraffe, and you wake up in the morning, and there's one hotel we stay in where it has these little cottages around this watering hole. And you wake up at 6 a.m. and sunrise, and you look down at the watering hole, and there's a lion or a giraffe or a hippo. Or it's just beautiful, and the people are just magical as well. It's a lovely part of the world.
Sure. So you obviously like the adrenaline. I don't like the adrenaline of going fast. I've been on a speedboat this weekend, and it made me sad.
Actually, I was thinking when you were talking about a speedboat up the Thames, we were up the Thames with a friend of mine who's got a speedboat, and we were herring along, and then we ran out of petrol, and so we managed to get to the side where there's one of those police stations on the thing, and we get off there, and I get the petrol can, and I go to get a taxi to go to a petrol station, and I'm thinking, I just hope I don't meet anybody that I know, because it's been quite embarrassing about having run out of petrol on a boat. That's the last thing you want to do. Anyway, so I hail this taxi down, get in the taxi, and he goes, "Oh, hi, Charlie." and I look at him, and it's a mate of mine who I go dirt bike riding with in Wales. I mean, how can that be? Anyway, then by the time I got home, I had friends texting going, "Oh, so you ran out of petrol on the Thames, did you?" And, oh man, it was just anyway. I love all that speed and adrenaline and
you've had quite a lot of accidents. I mean, as many accidents I would say maybe you shouldn't be getting on motorbikes, but you've had you've had serious accidents.
Yeah, the last 5 years has been quite bad.
Yeah.
I've had lots of accidents in the past because of running motocross bikes and enduro bikes, so that's part of the whole part and parcel. But in 2016, I got clipped by a car in Portugal and smashed my legs to pieces. Yeah. And that was quite bad. And that was 17 operations to get those back together. And that took 2 years. And I had big cages on my leg and stuff like that. But my daughter caught me. I was heading out the door with this big cage. I could. It was complicated because I broke both legs at the same time, which means you can't really get about. So, pooping and going to the toilet was always an issue. And because you were taking a lot of morphine, you just get bunged up. So it's just either you just can't shit or you do shit and it's really painful. And now I kind of have a sense of what childbirth is like. But anyway, so my right ankle was better, so I could get on crutches. So I was sneaking out the door because I decided that I could have this big cage around here. This those external cages holding your leg together, and I thought I'm thinking I could get, because I couldn't get on my normal motorbike because the cage, I couldn't get my foot close enough to change gear. So I thought, well, I can't ride that unless I put a little extension on the gear changer and then, to make it longer. Anyway, all that was going on in my mind. And then I thought, well, I can get on my wife's scooter. So I'm sneaking out the door, and my daughter suddenly appears at the door, and she goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, Ollie said that her scooter, there was something wrong with the front brake. And she goes, "Why do you need the helmet?" And this sort of, and eventually I said, "Look, I'm just going for a quick ride." Okay. Anyway, I went off and got on the bike, and I could ride the motorbike because it just twist and go. And then because I hadn't ridden the motorbike for like a year and a half, I was going along the road in Barnes, and all these cars and everyone was just flying past me, and I'm thinking, fucking hell, in a year and a half now, everyone's driving like nutters. Anyway, I looked down and I was doing 11 miles an hour, thinking this is really fast. Anyway, so that, but there were all sorts of things on that one. So, the biggest goal, apart from wanting to get back on a motorbike after these accidents, after smashing my legs, and it was always, the focus was always to get back on a motorbike. And I think that's what kind of kept my mental health so well, was because I had a purpose. I had a goal to get to. But my first goal was to sit on a toilet. That was my first goal. And I would get in the wheelchair and I'd be scooting along, and under the stairs is a little toilet under the stairs, and just a tiny little, just a toilet and a sink, and you have to go down 2 steps to sit in the toilet. I would go along and I'd keep looking at it and thinking, God, I'm sure there's a way of... Anyway, I figured out there was a way of... I thought I'd give it a go, and I took the wheelchair to the front, the first 2 steps of the steps going up to the upstairs, and there was a little landing bit, so I managed to get off the wheelchair, and I put my bum on the landing, and then I put my bum down onto the floor, and I shuffled my way to the toilet, and I put my legs in first, and then I thought, what I'll do is I'll hinge up on this better leg and pull my trousers down and swing around, sit on the toilet and take a poop. And it'd been like a year, you know. And so I did that. So I went around and got my trousers down, but as I sat in the toilet, I missed the toilet, and I wedged myself between because the wall was really close. I wedged myself between the toilet and the thing, and I was stuck in this edge thing like this, and I'm thinking, what the fuck am I going to do now? And my other daughter walked past. I remember she had her laptop and she was looking at something, and she just looked down and she said, "What the fuck are you doing there?" and just walked off. And I said, "Can you help?" And she said, "No." And I've somehow managed to pull myself up, finally sat on the toilet, and I tell you, I must say that was probably the best poop I've ever had in all my life. But it was, but there were loads of little milestones like that. It's quite difficult when there were life-changing results of it. So my ankle and my legs don't work so well anymore. I can walk and stuff, but I can't walk very far. I can't climb mountains anymore. I can't. You know, I look at people. My daughter runs up the stairs on the telephone, and I think, bitch. I just could never do that again, you know, and stuff like that. So there's lots of things that have happened, but as you recover, you know, you have these little, you have the big goal, but you have these little milestones as you go along, and I think you know, you need them, and it can be very difficult sometimes. You know, you're sitting there, and I was sleeping downstairs, and because I couldn't get upstairs for such a long time, and sometimes you know, because you're lying around all day, you don't necessarily sleep so well.
Sure.
At night, you know, and you wake up in the middle of the night, and that's when all the kind of the bad things go around in your head, and then you finally nod off again, and then you wake up and you think all the rubbish that you were thinking in the middle of the night, and scary stuff. But I think often you spend a lot of time sort of thinking about what if, should I, should have done that. Maybe if I left the hotel 5 minutes, a minute later, it would never have happened, and stuff. And then you got to sort of catch yourself, because no matter what you could have done, it doesn't make any difference, because it's happened, and there's nothing you can do to change it. So you're best to just park that trauma and not let it define you, and move on. And I think part of my healing was when I woke up the next day in hospital in Portugal, and both my legs were in plaster, and I'd broken my hand as well. So I was sitting there, and I only had one hand left. I'm thinking, fucking hell, this is bad. And I was really starting to feel really sorry for myself. And then I kind of realized there was another patient in the room, and I looked over, and there was another guy in the bed beside me, and he was in a terrible way, and much worse than I was. And I remember looking over at him, and I remember looking at myself, and I remember actually feeling quite cheery about the whole thing, and thinking, actually, this is not so bad.
They probably just employ that guy to go, they're quite badly let's get in the cast, full body cast. It's better than Patch Adams, this guy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that after that, and I know the accident was, you know, you were avoiding it, so someone else's fault, wasn't it? You were avoiding a car.
Still, it's, but on a motorbike, it's still kind of your fault. You should have seen it coming, you know.
But the fact that you wanted to go, the impetus to get better was to go back on the bike, is kind of I mean,
Dumb.
it's kind of crazy, but I mean, that's how much you love the. And you've had
think,
subsequent accidents as well beyond this one.
But I think it's the same with someone who loves. I'm sure you guys know someone who rides horses as well, and they'll always say they've broken a leg or an arm or whatever it is, and they still get back on the horse but I think I think the pleasure of being on a motorcycle, and I think it's a real, everyone talks about mindfulness now, don't they? And about your state of health. And we were talking about it earlier about testicular cancer and having cancer and having to deal with it. And the more you talk about it, the less of a problem it becomes.
Sure.
There's that great line in Crocodile Dundee when they say, well, how do you deal with problems? He goes, well, such and such tells Wally, and then Wally tells everybody, and then there's no more problem. Which is, to a degree, is quite true.
Yeah.
The more you talk about it. So I think, and then when you ride a motorbike, the idea of having had a stressful day at work and you've got your 20 or 30-minute ride home after work and you put your helmet on, there's no distractions. It's not like being in a car when you can still talk on the phone. You've got the radio, you might be eating crisps from the packet, reading the newspaper in traffic or whatever it is. And so by the time you get home, you're still busy with work. Whereas on a motorbike or on a bicycle, you by the time you get home, your mind is clear and you're ready to meet your kids or meet your wife or meet whatever's coming next. And I think it's a really good mindfulness way.
Okay.
And then after Africa, I got back on the bike after 2 years and went to Africa and then had a fucking massive crash again and really messed myself up at that time,
So two broken hand and two broken legs isn't really messed up. The next
one was pretty big. I bent this arm backwards and all the bones came out, and I had a big head injury and brain bleeds and brain swell, and broke my pelvis and had that plated, and broke my collarbone, had that and then broke all the ribs down my left side and punctured my lung and. I don't remember anything. I just remember waking up in Hull Hospital and my wife was there and I was looking at her and thinking, oh, fucking hell. And she was going, what the fuck have you done this time? She was really pissed off.
Yeah.
And so that was quite a bad one. And that was a big head injury. That really I really wasn't right. Actually, my wife said, what do you mean you weren't right? He said, you never have been, really. But that took, 4 or 5 months before I could even consider driving again. It was awful, actually, having concussion.
Yeah, I mean, but that's, but then you've subsequently done another of your big trips after that, right? So the long way up.
I've done another ones. Yeah, well, Long Way Up was after all of those.
Yeah.
And then there's a great book called Long Way Back if you want to buy it. It's all about the crashes.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it's extraordinary. I think it feels extraordinary to me that you could have a crash like that and within this time frame still be walking here and sitting here with and be as fine as you are. I know things aren't perfect, but
yeah. No, I mean, I don't think that yeah. I don't know. I mean, I remember when I first got back on my bike after the first crash. I remember properly when I got on a bike properly. And I rode down the road. And I was crying. I was just so happy and it wasn't so happy about being back on a motorbike, but it was being back in life, back to some form of normality. That's what really. And so the idea of being on a bike and being able to ride it was what marked the beginning of the end of my recovery. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that was such a milestone for me.
Yeah.
But I remember the other time when I was on the wheelchair, I thought I can drive, and that was on the first one. So I went to my car and with the wheelchair, and I got in the car, no phone, no keys. I was just completely so excited that I thought I could do it, and I drove off down the rode around. I got back, and someone had taken my parking space where my wheelchair was. So I was stuck in the car and I wasn't going to tell my wife that I'd gotten in the car. So then I had to stop outside the house and I had to beep on the horn until our front door opened up and my wife and my 2 daughters were there just looking at me as if just to say again, what the fuck are you doing? You know.
I'm starting to understand why they don't mind you going away for 4 months.
No, but yeah, no. So get back on the bike was definitely part of the recovery.
I mean, it's crazily impressive as well as crazy.
Just yeah. Well, and plus the fact that's the only thing I really know how to do.
Yeah.
And to actually make any money is to actually ride a motorbike. So part of me, doesn't really have a choice either. Yeah, one trick pony.
And so the latest, or Long Way Up, is the latest one, is all on electric bikes.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a while between those two series, right?
Yeah, it was 12 years
Yeah.
between two. I mean, I've been doing lots of other TV shows. I did the Dakar Rally, made a TV show that broke my hands on that one, and then did all these loads of ones called Extreme Frontiers and travelled all over the place and stuff. And so we were always busy. And Ewan was just rocketing off as this A-lister, and he'd just moved to the States. So we were, and then every time he was coming over here to make a movie, I was always going somewhere else to do a TV show. So we just kept missing each other, and then we just hadn't seen each other in ages. And then I had that first big crash. And I remember someone, I think my wife rang Ewan and said, look, Charlie's had this big crash, and I remember Ewan was on his way to work, and he was just about to get on his motorbike to go to work and had this big crash, and it was like shit. And then he went to go to get his car keys. He thought, maybe I won't ride today. And then he stopped halfway through and he goes, no. Charlie would be furious if you got in the car. So he got back on the motorbike and rode off. And then he just thought, God, this is stupid. We just haven't really seen each other for ages. And then we started talking, a bit more. And started talking about maybe doing another one. And then I had another crash, the second crash. And then he was over in London making a movie, and I was just recovering. I was sort of still, I'd been back in a wheelchair because I broke my pelvis. And anyway, he came over and he said, oh, can we come and stay for a couple of days just to say hi? And so they came, and then they ended up staying a month. And couldn't get rid of him. Fucking hell. It was like, so when is this film finished? And it was lovely having them there. And then we went away for a couple of weeks because we were going off somewhere, back to my father's house, and they stayed there, and we kind of made that connection again. And then we wanted to do a third one, but I don't think either of us really wanted to do it just on petrol bikes because we'd already done that.
Yeah.
And then it was Russ Malkin, one of the two producers on the TV show, said, why don't you do it electric? And we thought, the electric vehicles can't go anywhere, and then we thought, well, actually, why not? And then everyone says you can't do it, so it seemed like a good idea to do it. And there's this big thing. I'm sure all of you have that kind of, when you talk about electric vehicles, you talk about range anxiety, and people get very stressed and you go, well, that Tesla will only do 300 miles. I couldn't possibly have a car that will only do 300 miles. And you go, well, how often do you actually fucking drive 300 miles in a day? And they go, well, I go to Cornwall. And you go, yeah, well, when was the last time you were in Cornwall? Well, 2 years ago. And so, so I think there's lots of negativity about electric.
Yeah.
And I think if you're 35 plus, I think, it's a big negative thing. I think if you're below 35, and my kids, they don't give a shit what it is. I mean, most of them don't even have a car. They just take Ubers, and they wouldn't care if it was electric, or they have no. It's a very different concept of owning something is big. So we did it, and so now when people say, oh, I wouldn't have electric because you can't go anywhere, and you go, well, actually, you can.
So where was it? If this was up through America?
From bottom of Argentina
Americas,
to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And in the whole of South America, Central America, and Mexico, there are no fast chargers. So just plugging in. But that made it really interesting because, not only were we plugging into people's houses, but we were sort of plugging into their lives because you had to hang around for such a long time to let it charge. You were sort of having completely different. So whereas most of the time we'd spend in petrol stations, now we were just knocking around in people's houses. And that was it was a really nice experience. And because you could only go a certain distance each day, because there are no fast chargers. Your whole outlook of how you travelled was completely different. So not only was it a different vehicle, but it was a completely different experience as well. It was very cool. It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I'd miss the petrol engine, but quickly you don't miss it at all, because suddenly you can hear the road, you can feel the road, because there's no vibration of the bike.
Right.
You feel speed and acceleration in a completely different way, because there isn't that big whining. The more the engine revs, that suggests the faster you go. So, but there's none of that. So it's a completely different. So I'm not saying it's any better or any worse, but it's different, and it's cool.
And also, there's electricity everywhere, really, right?
Yeah.
So, like, there's not petrol everywhere. There's a chance you could be. I know there are petrol stations, but you can usually find some electricity if you need to.
No, for
which
sure.
you can't always with
for
petrol.
sure. And it is. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's fun, and you meet all sorts of people in a completely different way as well.
Yeah.
And then animals and stuff. I mean, you could pull up on the side of the road. I pulled up beside all these llamas, and because they weren't really making any noise, they didn't run away. They just hung out.
Right.
And they're quite pretty. They've got these beautiful eyes, big long eyelashes, and they sort of blink at you, and you become mesmerized by them,
Yeah, it's an extreme.
But and what is that? Anxiety, range anxiety syndrome isn't a new thing. And back in the day when petrol cars were just coming out, people had terrible range anxiety. So I'd leave my house and then head to Guildford, which is down the road. I had a full tank of gas, but when I get to Guildford, there was almost no chance of getting petrol, because the only places they would sell petrol when cars first came out was in chemists.
Right.
So you could only buy it, so people had terrible range anxiety. And then eventually petrol stations started to come around, and then people, suddenly petrol was everywhere. And the same thing is sort of happening now, isn't it? There's a bit of money in electric vehicles. Suddenly you see chargers everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I've got an electric car, and I've never had to charge it outside of. I've not ever gone on a really long journey in it, but I've never had to charge it outside of my house.
Yeah,
I have done it a couple of times just to see how you do it, but I can drive to London and back. I can drive obviously all the local stuff. It's really good.
And you must have felt really You were one of those little fuckers who were really smug in the last petrol crisis, sort of driving past, going.
Well, I was doing these actually. It was a really weird thing, because it was for 3 Mondays. I drove past every petrol station between my house and here, and they were all closed. I don't know if they'd opened up in the interim at all, or whether they've been closed for 3 weeks. But it did feel like, that is pretty good. Although now all fuel's going to be so expensive, I'm not sure electricity's going to be any better. Charging it at home is going to be any better.
With electricity now, you can charge your car, because you don't need to have it full all the time.
No.
So you can get these smart chargers now where you plug your car in, and it'll only charge the car on the cheap tariff between a certain hour and a certain hour. And so it's clever. And I noticed that, I don't know if you were knocking around London on a bicycle when on that first lockdown, when there was just nothing around. And I remember going past Buckingham Palace, and there was no. I stopped, and it was beautiful sunny day. There was blue sky. I'd never seen the sky so blue in London, and the air was so clean, and you could hear birds, and you could hear all this kind of stuff, and you suddenly had like a snapshot at what big cities would be like if the majority of the vehicles were electric. It would be that nice. So it's actually not that bad.
No,
I don't think.
No. Well, I think it's the way it's going to be going anyway. I think, which is it is very good. Have you got any other plans? Are you going on any more trips? Is there stuff coming up?
Yeah, I've got a few bits and pieces that I'm doing. I think you and I have been talking about doing another one, and so that might happen in the next year or so. And then I've got something going on in Ireland this year for this summer, which should be really fun. It involves motorcycles and a bit of cooking and a bit of culture and people, and because I grew up in Ireland, and that's where I kind of sort of first rode my motorbikes and stuff like that. I used to ride horses. I was a complete horse nut. And then a friend of mine had a motorbike, and I realized you didn't have to clean it, muck it out, feed it. You could ride it and beast it all day, and then just lean it up against the wall and go home. You know, it was a game changer. But so it's sort of back to my roots, I suppose, in Ireland.
Cool. Look, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you both just now and the other podcast we're doing, which is going to be a new podcast coming out soon about nuts, about testicles, losing testicles, and fantastic stuff in that as well, which I haven't really touched your testicles during this chat. Hardly at all. But thank you so much for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, give a massive round of applause to the incredible Charley Boorman.
Thank you very much.
Which one's which?
Thank you.
Thank you, mate. That's great. Thank you. Come back next week. We'll see you next week. You have been listening to RHLSTP with me, Richard Herring, and my guest, Charley Boorman. We look the same. It's confusing. Thank you to Scant Regard for playing the music for this bit here. It's nice. I'm indebted to my producer, Ben Walker. I'm indebted to the director, Chris Evans. Not that one. I'm indebted to all of the crew, including incompetent Soundman George. He's the best one out of everyone. Thank you to everyone at the Leicester Square Theatre for having us here and looking after us so nicely. Thank you as well to all the people who backed the Kickstarter, who are and include Benjamin Molawn, that's not a real name, Soren Muller, Rachel Todd, Andy Lloyd, Steve Fowler, Joe and Phil Belcher, Mauricio Reyes, I reckon I got that, Jolly Mnemonic, Jenny Sloman, Ryan Krellin, Anonymous, David Luton, Ben Freeman, Tim Killen, Louis Archer, Yes Please, Liz and Owen, Springsteen fan, Christine James, Phil McCracken, Gillian Wallace, Steve Mitkowski, Richard Nicholson, Greg McLeod, John Burton, Mark Inman, Stuart Gunpowder, Martin Peck, James Lynn, Matt Leahy, pronounced Leahy, I got it right, Not Applicable, Matt Hoskins, Bouncy B. Hall, Adam Holman, and Liz Sweet Summer Manton. That's crazy. This is a Sky Potato Fuzz and GoFasterStripe.com production. You can watch the videos of these shows at gfsboxoffice.com for a small fee. You can also come and see these shows live. Go to richardherring.com/gigs for more information of where RHLSTP will be on next. Become a badger at GoFasterStripe.com/badges. Thanks for listening. Go away.